A week from today, the curtain will go up at the Harrison Opera House on arguably one of the greatest operas ever written. It is Mozart's Don Giovanni. And we are going to preview that opera today with Dr. Glenn Winters, who is the Community Outreach Music Director for Virginia Opera. We've enjoyed his previews before, and we're looking forward, Glenn, to your preview of Mozart's Don Giovanni today.
It's wonderful to be back with you, Dwight. I always enjoy sharing my love of opera with your listeners, and there's a lot to talk about today.
There is indeed. It will open, as we said, on February 13th, 8 p.m. at the Harrison Opera House in Norfolk for 4 performances. Joe Walsh will conduct, Lillian Garrett-Groag returning as stage director, and, of course, some of the greatest music in the world by Mozart.
Well, you know, you mentioned one of the greatest operas ever written. When opera lovers have that discussion and try to formulate a list.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it is, but there are the usual suspects that are put on the table to enter into that discussion, and they're kind of predictable. Tristan und Isolde, Wagner makes the list. Oh, Verdi's last couple of operas, Otello, Falstaff are likely to be there, Carmen's likely to be there, and certainly Don Giovanni. Look, friends, I'll just tell you at the outset, this is more than a great opera. It's more than a great piece of music. It's more than a great work of art. When you see an achievement like Mozart's Don Giovanni, from my mind, I'll just tell you up front, it ranks up there with the great achievements of Western man in a couple of thousand years. Think of the Magna Carta, think of the invention of the airplane, think of the Bill of Rights and the discovery of the polio vaccine. Those achievements that are towering, that kind of justify our existence as a species. I think Don Giovanni is right up there with any of those. And I have a very daunting task today because we've got about an hour or so for me to convey the tippy tip of the iceberg of why I have such a high opinion of it. Just imagine if maybe you're a minister in a church and somehow you have to convey the entire Bible in one sermon. That's a little bit how I feel today. Don Giovanni, of course, the story of Don Juan, a very compelling character who will always be with us. Every age has its Don Juan, the legendary seducer. At one time, his name was Wilt Chamberlain, who boasted of seducing 10,000 women in his autobiography. At one time, his name was Casanova, a friend of Mozart's librettist, Lorenzo da Ponte. And Casanova, the famous seducer and, I think, part-time abbé, was in the audience for one of the first performances of Don Giovanni. Think of any of the skirt-chasing politicians who might qualify. You know all their names. We won't go into that. And a certain young golfer who's the subject of a lot of column ink these days. Don Giovanni is a compelling character because we can't figure him out. And he was popular in 1787 when Mozart's opera premiered in Prague in the month of October. There had already been a lot of treatments of Don Giovanni. In fact, there was a comic opera by one Giuseppe Gazzanigi. Dwight, do you play a lot of Gazzanigi here over the air?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot.
Man.
Well, friends, you're going to hear a little bit of Gazzanigi's Don Giovanni today. This opera came out in February of 1787 with a libretto by one Giovanni Bertati. And, you know, they didn't have copyright laws back in those days, and they didn't have our contemporary notion of intellectual property. And let's just be discreet and say that Da Ponte and Mozart borrowed heavily from Bertati's libretto. I think it would be actionable these days. Change the names and have a different rhyme scheme, but it's the same characters with the same sequence of events doing and saying the same things. And if we hear a little bit of Gazzanigi and side by side with Mozart, I think you'll come to understand why all opera lovers genuflect at the name of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. But there's one big difference between how Mozart treated the Don Juan legend and all previous incarnations, including the first one in 1630, a play by Tirso de Molina called El Burlador de Sevilla y Convidado de Piedro, the trickster or prankster of Seville and the guest of stone. Of course, the ghost of the man that he kills at the beginning of the play who returns to drag him to his eternal punishment at the end. Most of the stories have that plot outline. And when you hear that word, the trickster or prankster, that gives you a clue as to the difference. Don Giovanni was always played for laughs before Mozart. It was a farce. People laughed at the sexual escapades, a little bit like Richard Strauss's character Till Eulenspiegel in his famous poem. We laugh at the outrageousness of Don Juan, and we sort of laugh when he gets his just desserts very often. When the statue arrived in some of these previous operas like Gazzanigi's, very often the statue would still be on his horse, and it might be two men in a horse suit, and the audience would roar with laughter. So when Mozart, who was already well known in Prague for his uproarious comedy Le Nozze di Figaro, when his audience saw that, hey, now Mozart's done a Don Juan, well, that ought to be a really funny opera. Imagine their surprise when the first bars of the overture sounded like this. Yeah, a little puzzling, perhaps, to the average opera-goer who thought he knew what Don Giovanni was about. That's pretty grim. That's pretty serious. That is no joking matter. It might have been checking their ticket stubs at this point. And that continues. You see, Mozart views eternal damnation with a bit more gravity than some of his predecessors. And that continues. Now, folks, you all know what a scale is. Yeah, that's when Julie Andrews sings do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And you can sing it backwards. Do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. Now, a scale can go up or down, ascending or descending scales. As the serious section of the opening of the overture continues, you'll hear these scales and listen to them. What would you say the emotional affect is of these ascending and descending scales? How do they make you feel? Yeah, the word I'm thinking of is creepy. Pretty creepy, pretty ominous, pretty threatening. You could, if you had one of those movies about a haunted house where the girl is going up the stairs and everybody in the audience is saying, "Don't go up the stairs," that might be very appropriate music to play. Here's what I want to tell you about scales in Don Giovanni, and this is my humble opinion, but hey, this is my broadcast. I get to tell it like I see it. In my opinion, in Don Giovanni, scales represent doom. Repeat that after me, audience. Scales represent doom. The paying the piper, the facing the music, the consequences of sinful behavior. Now, these scales we'll hear again in manifestations that I won't even have time to present all of them to you, but I'll show you a couple of them, and it's really cool, and it's why Mozart is such a genius. Now, don't worry, it's not all gloom and doom. You know, Mozart and Da Ponte referred to this piece of music, this entire work, as a dramma giocoso. A drama, yes, but a giocoso, a joking drama. It's a funny comedy. A funny tragedy, a joking drama. And that's one of the kind of mysterious things about this amalgamation of so many disparate elements. There's great, earnest seriousness, and yet there's slapstick and humor and I Love Lucy kind of humor as well. I would call it a battle between not good and evil, but between frivolity and gravity. And that as the overture continues in the development section, you'll hear this played out graphically. Gravity versus Don Giovanni's frivolous lifestyle of pagan pleasure-seeking versus the Ten Commandments, the Old Testament justice that God is going to bring upon his head. Listen to King Kong and T-Rex battle it out in this section. So really, this piece of music, what I like about Mozart's overtures, it's not like a Broadway overture, where it's just a bunch of toe-tapping tunes. And, yeah, that was a nice melody, la-di-da-di-da. No, this is music about something. This is music that's foreshadowing, that's telling you in a nutshell, in a fine symphonic composition, what the entire opera is going to be, all the themes and all of the conflicts that are going to arise. It's music of ideas. And it's that literary device of foreshadowing that we borrow from fiction. Now, the curtain comes up, and here it would be fun to compare Gazzanigi's Don Giovanni in the opening scene with Mozart's, because they open in exactly the same way. In fact, truth be told, they continue in much the same way. We don't open with Giovanni, we open with his sidekick, the Sancho Panza to his Don Quixote, Leporello, the much maligned, much abused, long-suffering servant. He's called Pasquariello in Gazzanigi's, but don't worry about that. We'll just call him Leporello. Gazzanigi's Leporello is doing the same thing as Mozart's. He's doing sentry duty, while Giovanni is inside a big mansion in the Tony part of Seville, Spain, canoodling some woman in there. We don't know who yet. Leporello is outside griping. Oh, man, this is the life. I'm missing dinner. I'm hungry. I'm cold. It's always raining. I always have to be on the lookout for the sheriff. They fire the bullets at me. Oh, why do I have to be the servant? Why couldn't I have been born the rich, wealthy gentleman? He's like a GI in the army, griping. Let's see now. You're going to listen to Gazzanigi, and you might think, I'm telling you he's not a great composer, so you might be surprised that the music is quite competent. You might say, well, Glenn, that sounds good to me. I've heard a lot of Mozart in my lifetime. That sounds just like Mozart. It's very tuneful. I like it. What's wrong with it, Glenn? All right, well, judge for yourself. Let's hear Gazzanigi's Leporello griping about his hard life.
La gran bestia il mio padrone, ma il gran asino son io. Troppa soggezione non lo mando a far squartar, non lo mando a far squartar, non lo mando a far squartar. Vagito di donn'Anna, la di furto s'è introdotto.
Well, there you have it. It does sound like Mozart, doesn't it? In fact, that lovely little duet for the oboes right there at the end, Mozart often does that kind of instrumental writing. Well, what was wrong with that? It was tuneful, it was catchy, sounded like Mozart. Well, Glenn, you're just impressed with Mozart's reputation. He's all famous, so you kowtow to him. That was just as good. Oh, really? Okay, well, put that on one shelf in your brain. Now let's hear the very same scene, the same character saying the same things by Mozart. And folks, before Leporello even opens his mouth in Mozart's version, the orchestra does things that Gazzanigi never even thought of. Take a listen.
Voglio fare il gentil uomo
All right, now, what's the difference? Did you hear what the orchestra did? Bum, 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 drum, bum, 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 bum. What's the orchestra depicting? Well, he's impatient. He's impatiently waiting for his master. Folks, what do you do when you're impatient? You pace. You pace back and forth. That's what the orchestra is. You know, Mozart is easy for stage directors like our brilliant Lillian Groag to block out for the actors because all the stage direction is in the music. You just have to listen to the music. There it is. It's telling you, it's manifesting in music what Leporello is doing. He's pacing back and forth. Not only that, but, you know, he's a servant. He's a peasant. The music for a peasant should be fairly plain and not too aristocratic sounding. A little bit heavy, a little bit lumpy sounding like peasants are. Bum, 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 bum. That's not very elegant. Think back to Gazzanigi's. Now that you think about it, isn't that a little bit aristocratic sounding for a peasant? And it's not specific. It's a little generic. You could sing almost anything to that. Won't you join me for a cup of tea and biscuits? Oh, I love to go for bathing in the ocean. It's tuneful, but opera music is not ear candy. It's theater. And Mozart, you see, is the superior theatrical genius. Well, enough of Gazzanigi. Now, you may know, and if you're new to opera, then you don't know. And I'll tell you that Don Giovanni, in the course of this opera, is going to interact with three lovely ladies. And they represent the three strata of society that you now had post the French Revolution and at the end of the Enlightenment and the onset of Romanticism. You always had the aristocracy and the peasants, the haves and the have-nots. And now you've got this new phenomenon of the middle class. Well, Don Giovanni is going to try to canoodle with all three of these layers of the class system. Donna Anna is your entitled, beautiful aristocrat, the wealthy. Then you have Donna Elvira, the nice, respectable, religious, middle-class woman. And then little Zerlina, the cute as all get-out peasant. And the opening of Act 1 will show him encountering these three in that order, from highborn down to lowborn. Now, the interesting thing about Donna Anna is that we never see what happened during their sexual encounter. We don't see them interact. All we see is the aftermath. When the Leporello's aria is finished, Don Giovanni, who is masked, comes bursting out of Anna's bedchamber with her in hot pursuit, and she's saying, "Help, help, stop him." She's trying to keep him from getting away, calling, "Help, somebody arrest him, stop him, he assaulted me, he's a violent sexual predator, stop him." Well, I'll just point out that we don't know what happened because we didn't see it. All we ever know is what Anna tells us about it. Well, keep that in mind. What we do see, however, are the consequences of their encounter, in which her elderly father, the retired nobleman and military man, Don Pedro, known as the Commendatore, comes out. He hears the ruckus. He's got his sword in hand, and although he's many decades Don Giovanni's senior, he is going to defend his daughter's honor and challenges the scoundrel to a duel. Don Giovanni is reluctant. He says, "Put it away, old man. I don't want to kill you." You won't leave here unless it's over my dead body," croaks the old man, and Giovanni says, "As you wish." And we have the shortest duel in fighting history. It's worth just listening to it. It's 16 seconds of music. And again, Mozart, ever thinking of stagecraft. Folks, do you like to listen to those CSI shows on TV? Do you watch CSI Las Vegas or CSI New York? And you know, when they're doing the autopsy on the corpse, if there's a stabbing victim, they can always tell you how many stab wounds there were. Oh, yeah, this guy, he had 16 stab wounds. Well, Mozart's 16 seconds of duel music is so specific in its choreography, you can count the stab wounds. Count them with me. How many do you hear? Here's the shortest duel in fight history. At 4, how many did you get? And that last one, he left in there a little bit longer and kind of wiggled the sword a little bit to make sure that it was a fatal blow. And thus ends our breathless first scene. My goodness, an attempted rape and a murder have taken place in front of our eyes before we've hardly gotten past the overture. Quite an exciting beginning. It's a little like a James Bond movie that starts with a big action sequence. James Bond jumps out of an airplane and lands on snow skis and jumps on a horse and before you've even gotten your popcorn out. We move on. In the second scene, we encounter our middle-class woman, and there's an amusing case of a mistaken identity. Don Juan and Leporello, Giovanni and Leporello, observe a nice woman who has evidently just arrived in town, and she is complaining bitterly to herself about her jerk of a boyfriend. And this is music to Giovanni's ears. He gets half of his conquests by being a good listener. He's all ready to say, "Oh, sweetheart, he sounds awful. What a brute. You don't deserve that. Let's go to Starbucks. Tell me all about it. I'm a good listener." And, of course, before you know it, they're in bed. So he's delighted to hear this woman, whoever she may be, complaining about the man who abandoned her. We're going to hear Elvira's a little bit of her "Chi mi dici mai." And, again, Mozart is so good at capturing psychology. When you're very angry, doesn't your voice sometimes go from extremes of the low part of your vocal range to the high part? "Oh, I can't believe he did that to me." You're about to hear several examples of that. And, Donna Elvira, of course, the boyfriend she's complaining about is Don Giovanni. He just doesn't recognize her. It amuses me. He wasn't with her long enough to even recognize her voice. That tells you a lot. But this is interesting. This is almost a comic scene. We should be empathizing with Donna Elvira. She has been abused, maligned, and treated in a shameful manner. That's not funny. And yet, because of the comments that Giovanni and Leporello are making as they observe her, "Oh, yeah, this won't take long. Low-hanging fruit here, huh, Giovanni? Yeah, this'll be easy." We tend to regard her as a comic figure. We are, in terms of point of view, we in the audience are looking at Elvira through the eyes of Don Giovanni, and we see her as a potential mark. Listen to this. Poverina, croons Don Giovanni. "Oh, the poor girl. Pardon me, madam, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but overhear. Can I be of assistance?" And when she turns around and lifts her veil, it's kind of, "Oy vey, it's Donna Elvira." And it's a kind of a funny moment. We are reduced to looking at her as a somewhat ridiculous figure. And, of course, Don Giovanni, "Yeah, nice to see you. Gosh, I think my laundry's dry at the laundromat. I'll see you later," and makes a hasty exit, leaving Leporello, as always, to clean up his mess. And Leporello, now this is a key moment, and I want to spend a little bit of time with Leporello's great comic aria, one of the greatest comic arias ever written. It's a very entertaining but also complex piece of music, a lot going on. So let's take 5 minutes or so and talk about this aria known as the catalog aria, Madamina, il catalogo è questo. Leporello was going to take this young woman aside. She's so naive. She really thought that she and Giovanni were going to be husband and wife and have a big family and a golden retriever and move to New Jersey and raise a little vegetable garden together. And Leporello was saying, sweetheart, sit down. You see this big, thick book? It's all of the women that your husband has seduced. And as her eyes get bigger and bigger like saucers, he says, "Oh, yeah, read it with me. Osservate, leggete con me. Sit down. Let's read through it together, shall we? There's names, dates, places, descriptions, Maria in Barcelona in November. She was a little plump. Not bad, though, 7 out of 10, And they go through it, and he reads off these numbers. Oh, yes, in Italy, 640 women. In Germany, 231. In France, 100. Turkey, 91. And in Spain, ma in España, ya 1003. In Spain, he says with extra emphasis, because, sweetheart, that's where you live, 1,003. Now, what I want to have you listen for is the fact that, once again, the point of view is retained of being Don Giovanni's point of view. We are mocking, you and I, the listener, we are mocking and ridiculing poor Elvira because the orchestra is not empathizing with her, it's laughing. Listen for the strings. Every time Leporello reads off another total of conquests in this country or that country, the strings and the violins are going to laugh. Ha, 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 ha. You'll hear this over and over. That's the orchestra laughing, and it manipulates you and I into doing the same. Listen to the beginning of the catalog aria.
Malamina, il catalogo è questo, delle belle chiamò il padron mio, un catalogo gli è che ho fatto io. Osservate, leggete con me, osservate, leggete con me. In Italia 640, in Lamagna 231, in Francia, in Turchia 91, ma in Spagna, son già 1.300. 1.300.
Now, did you hear the laughter? Ha, 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 ha. Now, if you're going to describe that musically, what was that exactly? What were those flutes and violins doing? Yeah, they were laughing, but how would a musician describe it? Wasn't that a scale? Wasn't it going down by steps? Yes, it was. And you know what? We mentioned scales before, didn't we? And as Leporello continues, we start to hear the descending and the ascending scales. As Leporello continues reviewing the contents of this immense catalog of over 2,000 sexual conquests, you'll hear descending scales, and then starting low in the bass and the tuba and the not the tuba but the low strings of the orchestra, low guttural chucking and ascending scales. Listen to this, and then on the other side we have to discuss this because it's breathtaking what's going on.
In Italia 640, in Almagna 231, 100 in Francia, in Turchia 91, ma in Spagna son già 1.300. 1.300. Ma fra questi contadini, camerieri, cittadini, ma contesse, baronesse, marchesine, principesse e madonne d'ogni grado, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età.
And then at the end, did you hear Leporello join with the orchestra and sing those ascending and descending scales himself? Now, think back, class. What did we say scales meant? Do you remember, Dwight?
You're putting me on the spot.
Oh, yes,
I'm immersed in this music. Yes.
Yeah. Scales meant doom. It was going to be Don Giovanni's punishment, hellfire and brimstone. They sounded ominous in the overture. Remember how threatening and creepy? These didn't sound ominous. They said, this is a sparkling, vivacious, comic aria, this catalog aria. But I said they mean doom. What's going on here? Actually, this is when opera music gets to be really, really cool. That little passage you just heard, friends, you have to process this in 3 different ways. Number 1, it's still the laughter. Ha 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 ha. You have low chuckling and high giggling. The orchestra is still laughing at Donna Elvira. But also, it sounds a little bit like The Chase. It's depicting Don Giovanni. We talk about a skirt chaser. Look, remember Warner Brothers cartoons when Tweety and Sylvester would chase each other up and down stairs, and the orchestra would go, bop, 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 bop. As Tweety goes down and Sylvester goes up. Right here, you've got the prototype for that kind of descriptive music. It's also describing Don Giovanni's constant chasing of women. But there's something else, because scales do mean doom, and overlaying those two levels of meaning, Mozart and the orchestra are also saying, you know what? This is the very behavior that God is going to bring vengeance upon Giovanni's head for at the end of the opera. Go ahead. Laugh. Funny, funny, ha ha. Make a joke. Laugh, clown, laugh, eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow, something else is going to happen. You see, the shadow of God's punishment inhabits every comic scene of this opera. It's never far away. Scales mean something. And the hilarity is always tinged with the shadow of the reality that faces Don Giovanni, the terrible fate that awaits him. This is cool stuff. And Gazzanigi never thought of anything like it. Now, we need to go back. By the way, let me just stop and remind you, in case you've just joined us, my name is Glenn Winters. I'm joining Dwight in the WHRO studios today for this preview of Virginia Opera's production of Don Giovanni that will open a week from today at the Harrison Opera House at 8 in the evening on February 13th. We do hope you'll join us for that. And I'm the Community Outreach Musical Director for Virginia Opera, and it's my pleasure to be here and give you some of my thoughts and discussions and kind of queer, strange ideas about what's going on in this masterpiece. We'll continue by talking about one of the aspects that a great opera needs to have. A great opera has to be difficult. It can't be obvious. It has to make us think. It has to provide topics for discussions that will never end. It has to be hard. It has to have mysteries. There's a mystery in Don Giovanni. There's several. We'll have time to talk about a couple of them today. One is, what did happen with Anna and with Giovanni? While Leporello was doing his griping aria, what was going on behind closed doors? All we ever know is what Anna tells us. You're about to hear that in this recitative. There comes a point at which Anna, who knows Giovanni, everybody knows Giovanni, he's the richest man in town. He's got that big palace on the hill. She encounters Giovanni, who's acting quite the gentleman, and she turns to her fiancé, Don Ottavio, and says, Ottavio, that was him. That's the man who killed my father. I recognize his voice. And Ottavio says, why, dearest, surely you're mistaken. He's a fine gentleman. No, I'd know that voice. That's the voice of the man who assailed me and assaulted me and attempted to take my honor from me and killed my father. Well, again, all we know is what she tells us. You're about to hear a remarkable piece of music. Let's hear the end of her aria, her recitative, rather, which is, of course, sung dialogue. It's not a musical number. It's dialogue, but it's very dramatic because she is telling us blow by blow what happened. She has said, basically in Italian, I didn't know who he was. He came in. I thought it was you. But then suddenly he pinned me down by the wrists. I couldn't move. I struggled. I twisted. I writhed. And I always get a little uncomfortable when she says that. It sounds like too much information. Writhing and twisting. Yeah, that part of her story I think I might believe. Well, we'll see. She might be telling the truth. A lot of people think that he did assault her. She says that it was an attempted rape and that then her father came out and was killed. And she says in a thrilling aria, Orsai chi l'onore, she says to Ottavio, her somewhat dandified, foppish fiancé of many, many months standing, and I'm not sure these two are ever actually going to pull the trigger and get married. Between you and me, she says, if you're a man and if you love me, kill him dead. Avenge me. Avenge my father's life, avenge my honor, do the right thing, be a man, and kill him. Now, this aria, folks, again, we process it on different levels. Number one, this woman, Donna Anna, she is a force of nature. She is a compelling personality. I would want no parts of her. She's too much woman for me. She would chew me up and spit my teeth out like pumpkin seeds. She is a handful. High maintenance? Oh, yes. High maintenance on steroids. If Don Ottavio ever does marry her, he is going to be so whipped. Oh, yes. But, you know, when she's enraged like this, and whether the rage is because she was assaulted or because she feels guilty at having cheated on her fiancé and thereby brought about the death of her father, we don't know. But she's very enraged, and when she's enraged, she is magnificent. That's one of the levels on which this aria takes our breath away. Secondly, it's Mozart. You know, if you think of Mozart as the precious, cutesy boy wonder in a powdered wig and silk stockings who writes effete, fragile music, you're in for a surprise. This is the real Mozart. This is a very intense, one of the most intense arias ever written. Mozart is fully up to capturing all of the complicated psychology of this moment. It's a great composer taking a great moment of drama and hitting the ball out of the park, absolutely nailing it. I get chill bumps every time I hear it. Thirdly, the performer herself. You know, this piece is difficult. It's like the high hurdles. In her intense rage, her voice climbs higher and higher and higher. And it's a moment that calls upon a combination of skills for the performer. And when the performer hits the ball out of the park, then you have a moment that is unlike any other in all of opera. Here's the end of the recitative and the beginning of Orsai chi l'onore. Yes, trust me, you should get goose flesh when, if the actress cast in the role has any acting chops at all. This should be a very, very dramatic moment, magnificent. Now, the question is, do we believe her? Is she telling the truth, or is she telling a little bit of... Well, you know, folks, my mother-in-law, Lucille Easterling, who lives in a little town, Latta, South Carolina, a wonderful woman about 88 years of age, my mother-in-law has a saying. She'll say, well, I don't know if so-and-so was lying, but he sure was telling it his way. And I think it's just possible. I'm not saying that this is my interpretation. I just want you to think about this. It's possible that Anna is telling it her way. What if she was kind of stepping out on Ottavio? Why would she do that? And does the music offer us any clues? Well, you know, she described a violent attempted rape. There's no two ways about it. They didn't use that word in 1787, but it's what she's describing. Listen, rape is not about romance or love or appreciation of women. It's about power. It's about intimidation. And we didn't see Giovanni in action with her, but we do see him with that comely peasant girl, Zerlina. She's getting married. Zerlina is that very day. Giovanni really has no shame. He kind of separates her from her ridiculous bridegroom, the oafish Mazzetto, and starts putting the moves on her in that famous duet, La ci darem la mano. I just ask you, I put it to you, does this sound like a violent sexual predator to you?
La ci darem la mano, la mi dirai di
I ask you, wasn't that kind of gallant and charming and sweet? Does a man who can get a girl using that language really need to resort to physical violence? That's a good question, isn't it? And it works. He's good. Oh, he's good. Here's the end of La Cidarem, where together the peasant girl and the seducer sing Andiam, mio bene, which basically is, let's go, baby. Let's go. A ristorar le pene d'un innocente amor, to relieve the sweet pain of innocent love. And folks, listen, in between the phrases, the violins will play this little figure that kind of describes Zerlina's head swirling, dizzy with desire. Yeah, that's Mr. Smooth. So I'm just saying we'll never know for sure, and Mozart's dead. We can't tweet him on Twitter and ask him. But things are not necessarily as simple as they seem. And many scholars disagree and say that Anna is just telling it like it is and that he's got a violent side to him. Well, I didn't know that violent sexual sadists ever had a sweet side, but it's interesting. Something to talk about. Now, there's no doubt, however, that in singing that magnificent aria, Orsai chi l'onore, Anna was very aroused. There was a lot of passion there, and you know what they say about passion? Passionate hate is just the other side of the coin of passionate love. Whatever she thinks of Giovanni, the feelings are strong. And in fact, we never hear her interact with her panty-waisted, ineffectual Ashley Wilkes of a fiancé, Don Ottavio, with anything like that passion. Why is that? Women, I have a question for you, ladies in the audience. Why in study hall in high school did many of you stare at the kid who got suspended from school and was a bad boy and dream about him when you were ignoring the captain of the chess club who was staring at you? Mozart has a theory about this, and this is so cool. This is maybe the greatest 20 minutes in opera. We'll just hear a little bit. Right after Anna's aria, that passionate aria, Don Ottavio has a monologue, a little soliloquy in which he says, well, I'd do anything for her because I love her so much. He says all the right things. He sounds like a gallant, devoted lover boy. And it's a beautiful aria, this Dalla sua pace. But ladies, as you listen, rate this music on the testosterone scale for me. Here's a little bit of Don Ottavio. Yeah, Ottavio, you know the kind of husband he'll be. She'll say, sweetheart, go out to the car and get my luggage. Yes, dear. And can I rub your feet for you? And I'll bring you breakfast. Oh, you have a headache? Let me bring you breakfast in bed. He'll be very attentive and very sweet, and he'll never arouse an ounce of passion in her because the testosterone is not there. He talks the talk. And, you know, constantly in this opera, he talks about how he's going to bring that blackguard Giovanni to justice, and he never does squat. He talks the talk, doesn't walk the walk, and a little, about 1.3 in the testosterone scale. And immediately after that aria, and this is Mozart's genius, seconds later, there's the dawn in one of his rare moments of being alone on the stage with no women. He decides to hold a ball. He's having a great day. He thinks it's so funny. That business with Elvira, it made him laugh. Killing that old man, what a lark. And now he says, let's invite them all to our castle. We'll drink beer. We'll drink champagne. Let's hear that famous champagne aria towards the end. And this is animal magnetism. This is an 11 on the testosterone scale, 1 to 10. Here's the Don.
Una decina devi aumentar, se come incazza qualche ragazza, che come quella cerca meno. Alla Melissa, domani mattina, una decina devi aumentar, senza parole, la sia, chi di nuetto, chi la follia, chi la balla, fare alla Melissa, domani mattina, una decina devi aumentar, una decina devi aumentar, una decina devi aumentar, ma devi aumentar, devi aumentar, devi aumentar.
Kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Mozart's making a point. The music sounds, those two arias, the yin and the yang of a romantic male, sound the way they have that contrast on purpose. He knows what he's doing. He's using music as a tool to reveal psychology and to explain the passion in the preceding number of Donna Anna. Now, just a moment to talk about Donna Elvira. Throughout the opera, I said that from the aspect of point of view, we always see Elvira through Don Giovanni's eyes as a figure to be mocked, as a figure of ridicule. But Mozart is not a sociopath. People are not objects to Mozart, so the moment must come when we are inside Elvira's skull and empathizing with her, seeing her as she sees herself. And how does she see herself? She has this wonderful aria, Mitra di. And when I was an undergraduate in music school, accompanying all these arias as a pianist for various singers, this was my least favorite aria. I was young and foolish then. It's kind of repetitive. When she sings Mitra di, Donna Elvira is saying, gosh, I hate him, but when I see his smile, I melt. I want him to be punished, but I wish he would take me back. And she knows what a weakling she is. Mozart is going to give us a portrait here of what we now call OC disorder. Mozart, the greatest amateur psychologist who ever lived, before scientists even knew there was such a thing as obsessive-compulsive disorder, you're going to hear it right here. There's this musical figure. Ya da 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 da. It sounds like a circle, doesn't it? And it's continuous throughout the entire aria. Sometimes it's the strings that do it. Sometimes the flute. Sometimes the bassoon. Sometimes Elvira herself in the vocal line. It never stops. And it shows, it sounds like a circle because her mind is what? Going in circles. She can't stop this cycle of I love him, I hate him, I love him, I hate him. It's a magnificent, incredible masterstroke of psychological portraiture and music. Obsessive-compulsive disorder in Elvira. Did you hear the circles? Did you hear the torment of this poor woman? This cycle of behavior will only be broken when Don Giovanni is not there anymore. And let's jump to that moment. Remember our scales? We heard them ominously and threateningly in the overture. Then we heard them used in an ironic moment in Leporello's catalog aria. Well, eventually the statue arrives. The ghost of the man he killed, the Commendatore, arrives as God chooses that statue to be the messenger of doom. And as the statue says, well, you invited me to dinner, but I have other plans. I want you to dine with me. We hear those scales coming to fruition. Here they are. Now, there are two great mysteries. We're almost out of time, but I got to tell you what the other two great imponderable mysteries of this masterwork opera are. Here's one. You know, in Carmen, we wonder, why didn't Carmen just tell Don José she loved him when he had the knife at her throat? And in Don Giovanni, when the statue says, pentiti, repent, the statue saying it's not too late. Hell is opening up in front of you. Smell the brimstone. That's where you're going. But you have one last chance. Repent. Well, folks, what would you say in that position? Wouldn't you say, so sorry, it'll never happen again? I mean, who wants to go to hell? Why doesn't Giovanni say, I'm sorry? All he has to do is just, even if you don't mean it, just say the words. Say, I'm sorry. Yet listen to here really is the frivolity versus the gravity. It's a battle between those two forces. And is he insane? Is he brave? Is he stupid? Is he just a sinner who does what sinners do? Rebel. Here is Giovanni refusing to save his own skin and repent.
Lo sai che noi questo mai ti dico il suo figlio è l'ultimo momento ma ti non mi tanto me ti discellerà ma qui
some of the most truly terrifying music ever composed. Absolutely awe-inspiring, awful in the old-fashioned sense of the word awful, inspiring real horror. That is compelling drama. And the question remains, why does he refuse to repent? You know, it reminds me, is he brave? Is he brave? You know, you have to play, life is a game. And you win the game by playing by the rules. And the rules are the 10 Commandments. It's easy. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't lie. Don't steal. Don't cheat. You know, and if then you win and you go to heaven, why not? Don Ottavio plays by the rules. Don Ottavio goes to church. He gives money to Haiti. You know, he's kind to widows and orphans and dogs. He's a man of honor. He'll win the game. Why? Don Giovanni is saying, I don't want to play the game. It's a stupid game. I don't repent of anything. Remember in Milton's Paradise Lost what Satan said? He said, I'd rather be a ruler in hell than to serve in heaven. Your game stinks, God. I quit. Maybe that's what's going on. Is he brave? Is he a brave romantic hero? I don't know. Maybe he's just a sinner, and he sins because that's what sinners do. Maybe he's foolish. Talk about it. See what you think. See what Lillian Groag appears to think, and then talk about it at your favorite coffee place afterwards. Now, here's the last mystery. The last mystery is, what's wrong with you and me? Mozart, the master manipulator. Once he's gone, and the stage is empty, and Leporello is left to tell what happened to the rest of the cast, why do we feel so empty? He's a terrible person. Don Giovanni has no redeeming character virtues. He lies, he cheats, he steals, he betrays, he kills, he seduces, he uses women like objects. Why do we miss him so much? The music has manipulated us. He was our favorite character. Why? Here's the epilogue where Don Ottavio is talking about how happy they will all be now that horrible person is gone. Listen to a few seconds of this dreadfully dull person. Yeah. Have a happy life, and thank goodness you're going away now so I don't have to watch the rest of it, because you're just not as compelling a person. Gosh, that Giovanni, he was a scoundrel, but don't you kind of miss him? What's wrong with us? What really happened with Anna and Giovanni? We can't know. Why did Giovanni say no? We can't know. What's wrong with you and me that we like him the best? We have to think about that. All this is what great art is comprised of, these mysteries. I hope you'll enjoy it. I've enjoyed sharing my thoughts about Mozart's Don Giovanni with you today. I'll see you at the opera.
Dr. Glenn Winters, Community Outreach Musical Director for Virginia Opera, with some wonderful insights into Mozart's Don Giovanni, the next offering from Virginia Opera. It opens on Saturday, February 13th. Performances then follow on the 17th, 19th, and 21st at the Harrison Opera House. Joe Walsh will conduct. Lillian Groag returns to Virginia Opera to direct this production. And in the cast, the title role sung by Matthew Worth. Nicole Follin will be heard as Donna Anna. Christina Nassif of Virginia Opera Favorite returns as Donna Elvira. Don Ottavio, sung by Chad A. Johnson. Daniel Mobbs will portray Leporello. Sarah Jane McMahon as Zerlina. Mazzetto, sung by David Crone, and the Commendatore by Nathan Stark. Virginia Opera's production of Don Giovanni, opening a week from today. We hope you'll get your tickets and enjoy it, especially in light of Dr. Winters' comments. We'll all enjoy this great opera even more. Here is the number, 866-OPERA-VA, 866-OPERA-VA, or you can go online to vaopera.org, vaopera.org. Thanks as always to Glenn Winters, and we hope you'll enjoy Don Giovanni as presented by Virginia Opera.